Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. After being married and divorced, I realized that sometimes one sentence reveals everything you need to know about where you stand in someone's priorities. My name is Edwin, and this is how I realized I'd rather be alone than disrespected in my own home. I met Angela, the woman who would later become my wife, when I was 34, had my own HVAC business that was doing well. Angela was 30, recently divorced, and had an 8-year-old daughter named Madison who seemed like a sweet, well-behaved kid. Angela was working as an administrative assistant and clearly struggling with the financial pressures of single motherhood. She was renting a small 2-bedroom apartment and trying to make ends meet on one income while giving Madison everything she needed. I respected her independence and work ethic, but I could also see that life was harder than it needed to be for both of them. Madison, who would later be my stepdaughter, was shy when I first met her, but she warmed up to me pretty quickly once she realized I wasn't trying to replace her father. I made sure to build a friendship with Madison while things got serious with Angela, because I knew that any relationship with Angela had to work for Madison, too. Over the next few months, I spent time getting to know both of them as individuals and as a family unit. Madison and I would go for ice cream while Angela was at work, or I'd help her with homework when Angela came home exhausted. With time, Madison got more comfortable around me. What I appreciated about Angela was that she never pushed Madison to accept me or tried to force a father-daughter relationship that neither Madison nor I was ready for. She let us develop our own connection naturally, which made everything feel more genuine and sustainable. Madison seemed genuinely happy about having me around, especially for activities that required having a man involved. Madison was a good kid in those early days. She was polite, helped with small chores when asked, and never gave her mother any serious problems. She'd get excited when I'd show up to pick them up for weekend activities, and she'd tell me about her day at school with a kind of enthusiasm that 8-year-olds have for everything in their lives. After about 3 months of friendship, Angela and I started officially dating. I was still careful to keep things moving slowly because it's been a while since I got into a serious relationship, and I didn't want to disrupt Madison's stability and make her feel like I was taking her mother away from her. We did a lot of family activities on weekends so Madison could get used to thinking of us as a unit. During this dating period, Madison continued to be a delight to be around. She'd ask me questions about my work, want to see pictures of the air conditioning systems I'd installed, and tell her friends that her mom's boyfriend was really nice and knows how to fix everything. Angela would laugh about Madison bragging to her classmates about having someone around who could repair bikes and help with science projects. The dating phase lasted about 2 years, during which Madison grew from 8 to 10 years old. By the time Angela and I were ready to get married, Madison felt like she was already part of my family. We got married when Madison was 10 years old. She was my junior bridesmaid at our small wedding ceremony, carrying a small bouquet that matched Angela's flowers. During the reception, after the wedding, Madison started calling me Dad, which felt like the perfect balance between acceptance and respect for her biological father. Her real dad hadn't been involved in her life since the divorce, so I wasn't competing with an existing relationship. Madison seemed to understand that I was stepping into a father role while still honoring the fact that I wasn't her biological parent. That summer, Angela and Madison moved into my newly rented 4-bedroom house, and I tried to make the transition as smooth as possible for both of them. Madison got to pick out new furniture and decorations for her room, and we set it up exactly how she wanted it. Angela was relieved to finally have someone stand in as a man in her life, as she constantly adores me. I took my role as Madison's stepfather seriously. I paid for her dance classes, school supplies, and clothes without thinking twice about the expense. When she needed help with homework, I'd make time to sit with her at the kitchen table until she understood the material. I drove her to friends' houses in my free time and picked her up from activities when Angela was working late. We established family traditions during those first few years. Madison seemed to thrive with the stability and structure that the household provided. She generally seemed happier and more confident. Our family vacations were some of the best times we had together. We'd take Madison to the beach every summer and visit theme parks during school breaks. Madison would get so excited about these trips, counting down the days and making lists of everything she wanted to do. Angela and I felt like we were giving her the kind of childhood experiences that might not have been possible if Angela had remained a single mother. Everything felt normal and healthy. For the first 3 years of our marriage, this arrangement worked well for all of us. Madison was a good kid who followed house rules, treated both Angela and me with respect, and seemed genuinely happy. I felt like I was successfully filling the father role she'd been missing, and Angela seemed relieved to have a partner in parenting. But when Madison turned 13, things gradually changed. At first, it seemed like normal teenage development, wanting more independence, caring more about friends and family time, and occasionally pushing boundaries to see what she could get away with. Angela and I expected some adjustment as Madison hit adolescence. It was something we had already had a private conversation about. The first real problem came when Madison started staying out past our established curfew. We had clear house rules: home by 7 p.m. on school nights and 8 p.m. on weekends. These weren't unreasonable expectations for a 13-year-old, and they were rules that Angela and I had agreed on together when Madison was younger. Initially, Madison would come home just 15 or 20 minutes late, with explanations about losing track of time or getting offered a ride home later than expected. But the lateness became more frequent, and the excuses became more elaborate. Angela would dismiss these violations as normal teenage behavior, but I was concerned about the pattern of disrespecting our boundaries. The situation came to a head one Tuesday evening when Madison didn't come home until 10:30 p.m. on a school night. She was supposed to be at her friend Jessica's house working on a group project, but when we called Jessica's parents around 9 p.m., they said the girls had finished their work and left an hour earlier. We had no idea where Madison was for over an hour. Angela was worried sick, calling Madison's phone repeatedly and getting sent straight to voicemail. I was angry about the complete disregard for our rules and our concern for her safety. When Madison finally walked through the door at 10:30, she acted like nothing unusual had happened and seemed annoyed that we were upset. The next morning, I sat Madison down before school to discuss what had happened. I explained that house rules existed for her safety and to show respect for the people who cared about her. Madison rolled her eyes and said it wasn't that big a deal, and that she'd just been hanging out with friends at the park near Jessica's house. I calmly but firmly explained that there would be consequences if this happened again. No going to friends' houses for a week if she couldn't follow our curfew rules. Madison argued that all her friends were allowed to stay out later, and that our rules were unreasonable compared to other families. I told Madison that I didn't care what other families did in their homes, but in our house, we had rules that everyone needed to follow. This led to Madison getting angry and yelling that I couldn't tell her what to do. The comment stung, but I stayed calm and told her that I was the adult in this house, and she needed to respect our boundaries. Madison stormed off to school that morning, slamming the door behind her. I expected Angela to back me up when she heard about our conversation, but instead, she remained completely silent. When I explained what had happened and how I'd handled it, Angela just nodded and said she hoped Madison would be more responsible going forward, but I should be gentle with her. I had no idea if Angela's silence during this confrontation sent a clear message to Madison that her mother wasn't going to support my authority. Over the following months, Madison became increasingly disrespectful toward me, apparently interpreting her mother's neutrality as permission to ignore my rules and requests. Madison began becoming disrespectful, giving sarcastic responses when I mentioned anything she did wrong, and generally treating me like an unwelcome roommate rather than a parent figure. Even when I'd ask her to turn down her music or clean up after herself, she'd make comments about how I was always complaining about something. Angela continued to avoid addressing Madison's disrespectful behavior, probably hoping that things would improve naturally without direct intervention. But Madison's attitude only got worse as she realized that I had no real authority in the house if her mother wasn't going to support me. By the next year, things got significantly worse. At this point, Madison would ignore my requests, her mother, Angela, would remain neutral during conflicts, and I was left feeling like I was the bad guy who always had something to say. Madison's room became messy. Her chores were consistently ignored, and her attitude toward me became openly hostile. When Madison was 15, things escalated further. I overheard her having a phone conversation in her room that was clearly sexual in nature. She was talking to some boy about things that seemed inappropriate for a 15-year-old, using language that made me uncomfortable as her stepfather. When the call ended, I knocked on Madison's door and asked if we could talk. I tried to approach the conversation carefully, explaining that I was concerned about some of the things I'd overheard and wanted to make sure she was making smart decisions about relationships and physical intimacy. Madison immediately became defensive and angry, accusing me of spying on her and invading her privacy. She yelled that I had no right to monitor her phone calls or comment on her personal relationships. I tried to stay calm and explained that my concern came from caring about her well-being, not from wanting to control her life. The conversation ended with Madison slamming her door and refusing to discuss the issue further. When Angela came home from work that evening, Madison immediately complained to her mother about my invasion of privacy and interference in her personal life. Madison told Angela that I'd been spying on her phone calls and that I had no business commenting on her relationships. She exaggerated what had happened, making it sound like I'd been deliberately eavesdropping rather than accidentally overhearing a conversation through her bedroom door. Angela listened to Madison's version of events without asking for my side of the story. When I tried to explain my concerns about age-appropriate behavior and my responsibility as a parent figure, Angela said nothing. She didn't support Madison's position, but she also didn't back me up or address the underlying issues. This pattern of Angela's silence, when conflicts arose between Madison and me, became the new normal in our household. Angela would listen to Madison's complaints about my unfair treatment, but wouldn't engage in discussions about appropriate boundaries or consequences for disrespectful behavior. After this fight, things continued to deteriorate. I stopped trying to discipline or guide Madison because I realized that Angela would never support my authority. Madison's behavior became increasingly problematic, staying out later, letting her grades slip, and treating me with open contempt. I started noticing small items going missing from around the house occasionally. Nothing major, but things like loose change from my nightstand, gift cards from the kitchen drawer, or small electronics that I couldn't locate when I needed them. I suspected Madison might be taking these things, but I didn't want to create more conflict by confronting her without proof. Madison had begun treating me disrespectfully. She'd walk past me without acknowledgement, interrupt conversations between Angela and me, and make it clear through her body language and attitude that she didn't respect me or value my presence in their lives. Angela continued to pretend that everything was fine, avoiding any discussions about Madison's behavior or our family dynamics, even when I directly complained to her. She seemed to believe that ignoring the problems would make them go away, but instead, Madison's attitude grew worse as she realized there were no consequences for treating me poorly. The breaking point came the next year, when Madison was 16. I kept a small amount of petty cash in my bedroom dresser drawer, usually around $100 for emergencies or small expenses that came up during the week. It wasn't a secret, but it also wasn't something I talked about or counted regularly. One afternoon during the weekend, when I went to get money for a service call, I noticed that there was only $20 in the drawer instead of the $100 I thought I'd left there. I was pretty sure I hadn't spent the missing $80, but I wasn't completely certain of the exact amount that should have been there. Later that day, I happened to walk past Madison's room and saw her sitting on her bed counting cash. She had several $20 bills in her hands, which seemed unusual since I knew Angela didn't give her that kind of spending money regularly. I knocked on her door and asked where she'd gotten the money. Madison initially claimed that she'd been saving her allowance and had gotten some cash for her birthday from relatives. But when I pressed her about the specific amount and timing, she eventually admitted that she'd taken the money from my dresser drawer. She said she'd needed it for something important and planned to pay it back before I noticed. I was furious, not just about the theft, but about the lying and the violation of trust. I told Madison to come with me to the living room, where Angela was watching television, because this was something her mother needed to address immediately. I explained to Angela that Madison had stolen $80 from our bedroom and had lied about it when confronted. I expected Angela to say something about Madison's behavior. This wasn't a small mistake or teenage rebellion. It was stealing from the people who were supporting her. Instead of addressing Madison's behavior, Angela turned on me. She said that I didn't need to lecture her daughter, and that I should mind my own business when it came to Madison's actions. Then she added, "If you want someone to lecture, get your own kids." I stood there in shock, looking at Angela and Madison. Madison was actually smirking, clearly pleased that her mother had chosen her side over mine. Angela was staring at me defiantly, as if I was the one who'd done something wrong by expecting her to parent her daughter. In that moment, I realized that I would never have Angela's support as a parent figure, and Madison would never respect me as long as her mother undermined my authority. I'd spent years trying to build a family with these people, and they just made it clear that I would always be an outsider. I looked at both of them, smiled, and said, "All right." Then I walked upstairs to my bedroom and started thinking about how to end this marriage. That wasn't the first time things had gone missing from our house, and Madison's theft of my money was just the latest in a pattern of disrespectful behavior that Angela refused to address. I wasn't willing to keep pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Within a week, I contacted an attorney to begin divorce proceedings. I realized that this pattern would never change. Madison would continue to disrespect me. Angela would continue to enable her daughter's behavior by being silent, and I would continue to be blamed for trying to maintain basic boundaries in my own home. I didn't file for divorce because I was angry about the money or even because of Madison's behavior specifically. I filed for divorce because Angela had made it clear that she would never be my partner in creating a functional household. She would always choose her daughter over our marriage, even when her daughter was clearly in the wrong. The divorce process was messy and expensive, just like I'd expected it to be. Angela was shocked when she was served with papers, but at first didn't try to reconcile. I knew that trust and respect, once broken, couldn't be rebuilt with promises. So even if she wants reconciliation, I won't look at her the same. Angela's attorney demanded spousal support, claiming that she'd given up career advancement opportunities to focus on our family. There was no truth to this argument, and my attorney countered this claim. The legal battle dragged on for several months, during which Angela and Madison continued living in my house while we worked out the settlement. This period was uncomfortable for everyone, but I was determined to see the process through to its conclusion. In the end, I lost some money in the divorce settlement. Angela received a cash settlement. But despite the financial cost, I was relieved to finally be free from a situation where I was constantly disrespected and undermined. Angela and Madison had to find a new place to live, and I got my house and my peace of mind back. The whole experience taught me that respect is more important than keeping the peace in a relationship. I'd spent years avoiding confrontation and accepting disrespectful behavior because I wanted to maintain our family unit. But a family where one person is constantly undermined and disrespected isn't really a family at all. Looking back, I think Angela's unwillingness to support my authority came from her own insecurities about parenting and her fear of Madison's rejection. She was so afraid of being the bad guy with her daughter that she was willing to sacrifice our marriage rather than set appropriate boundaries. Madison learned from her mother's example that manipulating adults and avoiding consequences was an acceptable way to handle problems. By the time she was 16, she'd become skilled at playing her mother against me and using emotional manipulation to get what she wanted. I'm much more careful about getting involved with women who have children. I've learned to pay attention to how potential partners handle discipline and whether they're willing to present a united front when it comes to household rules and expectations. Most importantly, I've learned that blended families only work when both adults are committed to being partners in parenting. If one person is unwilling to support the other's authority, the relationship is doomed to fail because children will naturally exploit that division. Angela's 8 words, "Don't lecture my kid, get your own," revealed everything I needed to know about where I stood in her priorities. She was telling me that I would never be considered Madison's parent, despite 8 years of treating Madison as my own daughter. Sometimes the most honest moments in a relationship come during conflicts, when people say what they really think without filtering their words through politeness or diplomacy. Angela's response to Madison's theft showed me that she would always choose her daughter over our marriage, regardless of the circumstances. Today, I'm living peacefully in my house without the constant tension and disrespect that characterized the final years of my marriage. I don't regret my decision to end our marriage. Some relationships can't be saved when fundamental respect is missing, and no amount of love or commitment can overcome a complete lack of partnership in important decisions. The experience taught me that my self-respect was worth more than any relationship, even one I'd invested 8 years in building. Sometimes walking away is the healthiest choice you can make, even when it costs you money and disrupts your life plans. I'm grateful that Angela finally said what she really thought about my role in their family, because it gave me the clarity I needed to make a decision I should have made years earlier. Her words freed me from a situation that was slowly destroying my sense of self-worth and showed me that I deserved better than being treated like an outsider in my own home.